In this video, you'll see the third way that you can solve a quadratic equation, and that is using the quadratic formula. Before, we talked about solving using square roots and solving by factoring. So this is the third way, by using the quadratic formula. When you're solving using the quadratic formula, you want to make sure that one side of your equation is always equal to 0. So you'll have a quadratic equation that looks like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Your number in front of x squared is a, the number in front of x is b, and then your constant is c. And then this is your quadratic formula. So anywhere that you see a in your formula, you're going to plug in your a value. Anywhere that you see b, you're going to plug in your b value. And anywhere that you see c, you're going to plug in your c value. And these different values in the equation are going to allow you to solve for the x values. So let's look at an example. We have kx squared minus 7k minus 3 equals 0. First thing you always want to check for is that your equation is equal to 0, which it is. So you don't have to do any moving around because it's already equal to 0. So your number in front of k squared is a. So this is an imaginary 1. In front of k would be your b. And then the constant number is your c. So a equals 1. B equals negative 7, and C equals negative 3. So we're going to plug those values into our quadratic formula up here. So we have x equals, so the negative comes from the formula, this negative right here, and then our b value is negative 7, so we have negative 7, because that went in for b. And then plus or minus the square root of b squared. b is negative 7 squared. Minus 4. And then a times c. So our a value is 1, and our c value is negative 3. And then everything is divided by 2 times a, which is 1. So we're going to start by simplifying just what's inside the square root, not taking the square root of anything yet. So x equals negative 7 becomes a positive 7. Plus or minus the square root of. Now inside the square root, when we put that into our calculator, negative 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 3, we get 61. And then everything is divided by 2 times 1 is 2. So then the next thing we're going to do is take the square root of 61. So you have 7 plus or minus. Now the square root of 61 is 7.8. And then divided by 2. So this is where we now create two different equations to solve. One where we use the plus sign, and one where we use the minus sign. So we have 7 plus 7.8, and then divided by 2. And we have 7 minus 7.8, divided by 2. So 7 plus 7.8 gives us 14.8, divided by 2. You get x equals 7.4. 7 minus 7.8 is negative 0.8 divided by 2, and you get negative 0.4. So these are our two x values for using the quadratic formula. And that's how you would do a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. So let's look at the next example. This one we have 5x squared plus 7x plus 18 equals 7. Now it's not equal to 0 right here, so you need to make sure that we can make it equal to 0. We'll do that by subtracting 7 to both sides. I'm going to line it up under its like term, so it's going to go underneath the 18, because we can combine those. That's going to become 5x squared plus 7x. 18 minus 7 gives us plus 11, and then equals 0. Now we have it equal to 0. Our a value is 5. Our b value is 7. And our c value is 11. So we're going to plug those into our formula. So x equals negative b, so negative 7, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 7 squared, minus 4, a times c, where a is 5 and c is 11. And then everything is divided by 2 times a, which is 5. So we're going to start by simplifying just the inside of our square root. So we have x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of. Now when we put that into our calculator, 7 squared minus 4 times 5 times 11, that's going to give us negative 171. And then everything is divided by 2 times 5 gives us 10. Now if you try to take the square root of negative 171, if you put that into your calculator, it's going to come up and it's going to say error, because you can't take the square root of a negative number. So this is a case where there is no solution, or you can use your no solution symbol. Anytime you try to take the square root of a negative number, it's not going to work. You get an error, so it's no solution. So let's look at the next example. So this one we have 6x squared is equal to 10. Now we want to have 0 right here, which we don't, so we're going to subtract 10 to both sides. I can't combine 6x squared and 10, because they're not like terms, so it's just going to be written as 6x squared minus 10 is equal to 0. So our general form for a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. In this equation that we have a 6 for a and a negative 10 for b. Excuse me, for c. So we don't have a b value. That means that b is going to equal 0. So a is 6, b is 0, and c is negative 10. You always want to make sure that you have a value for all a, b, and c. Even if that value is 0, it's okay. So now we're going to plug those numbers in. We get x equals negative b, so negative 0, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 0 squared, minus 4 times a times c, where a is 6 and c is negative 10. And then everything is divided by 2 times a, which is 6. So now we're going to just do the inside. So x equals, you can't have negative 0, so we're just going to write 0, plus or minus the square root of. So inside our square root, we have 0 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 10. So we're going to put that into our calculator and see what we get. So inside our square root, we end up getting 240. And then everything is divided by 12, because 2 times 6 is 12. Now we're going to take the square root of 240. So the square root of 240 is 15.5. So we have 0 plus or minus is 15.5, and then it's all divided by 12. This is the point where we're going to make two equations, one with our plus sign, one with our minus sign. So we'll have 0 plus 15.5 divided by 12, and we'll have 0 minus 15.5 divided by 12. So 0 plus 15.5 is going to give us 15.5, and then divided by 12, we get x equals 1.3 about. 0 minus 15.5 is negative 15.5, and then divided by 12, we get x equals negative 1.3. So those are our answers for this quadratic equation. So let's look at the next example. This is our last one. So we have 3n squared plus 13n minus 7 is equal to negative n squared plus 3n. So it's not equal to 0. So we want to get 0 over here. I'm going to add n squared to both sides, and then subtract 3n also. So I lined those up underneath their like terms, the ones that we could combine them with. Those are both going to cancel out, so we get that 0 that we wanted on that side. 3n squared plus n squared is 4n squared. 13n minus 3n is plus 10n, and then that minus 7 we didn't do anything with, so it just comes down. Now our a value is 4, our b value is 10, and our c value is negative 7. So a is 4, b is 10, and c is negative 7. So we're going to take those values and plug them into our quadratic formula. X equals negative b, so negative 10, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. A is 4, c is negative 7. And then everything is divided by 2 times a, which is 4. So first we're going to do the inside of our square root. 10 squared minus 4 times negative 7. So we have x equals negative 10 plus or minus the square root of. Inside our square root we should get 212. And then everything is divided by 2 times 4, which is 8. Now we're going to take the square root of 212. So x equals negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 212 is 14.6 about, and then divided by 8. So now we get our two equations. So we can have negative 10 plus 14.6 divided by 8. And we can have negative 10 minus 14.6 divided by 8. So negative 10 plus 14.6 gives us 4.6 divided by 8, which is about 0.6. So x equals 0.6. Over here, negative 10 minus 14.6 is negative 24.6 divided by 8, which gives us about negative 3.1. So those are our two solutions using the quadratic formula for that problem.